And we're back with another episode of Franchise My Business, the podcast for franchisors, hosted by franchisors. I'm your host, Kevin Oldham, and we are going to talk about flow. When you hear that word, what do you think? Do you think it's a mental state where you're able to go deep into your work and almost make it feel like play? That's what I think of flow. I think of flow as a state where I am working, but it does not feel like work. Like things are just happening. There's not a ton of deep friction. Doesn't mean that there's not friction, like little things like technology not working and things like that. But moreover, with my thought process, there's not a lot of friction. There's not a lot of resistance. By the way, if you want to learn about resistance, search for Seth Goden and resistance. He does a lot of writing on this, and it's actually not his original work. I think it came from Stephen Pressfield or some other author. But the resistance is our lizard brain coming at us and saying, hey, we don't want to do fill in the blank. And whatever fill in the blank is. And I would argue that when you're in a state or a season of flow in your franchise system, your reptilian lizard brain that's telling you, hey, this is something I don't want to do, goes into its shell. It doesn't ever go away. And I think that there's seasons of flow in a franchise as well. If you think about the formative stages of a franchise, there may not be a ton of flow. There may be a lot of friction as you're trying to figure out things and figure out how to do new things. But then once things start operating, you may find yourself in a season of flow. It's a season where things just work for you. Franchise sales may not be as challenging if that was something that was challenging before. Communication with your franchisees may be a lot smoother than it historically has been. And I think that as we talk about humans being in flow a lot, but we never really talk about a business being in flow. And that's what I want to talk about is a season of flow in your franchise. A season of flow in your franchise, to me, or in any business, means that things are going pretty better than typical. They're not as laborious. They're maybe not as painful for you, right? Again, it doesn't mean that every single thing is awesome. It just means in the aggregate that things seem to go a lot easier in your business. Maybe you've worked out a lot of the kinks. Maybe you've gotten rid of a franchisee that was a thorn in your side. Maybe it was just anything. Maybe you brought a location on and that franchisee is just full of so much energy and positivity that it gets you into your system into a state of flow. So I think that one of the things that I want to dive into is the fact that flow can be something that we encounter as humans. Like when we're operating in our zone of genius and work doesn't feel like work feels like play. A lot of times that's what we would consider to be our flow state. But when we look at it from an organizational perspective, when things aren't as much of a grind to get you where you want to go, when your team members are working in harmony together versus maybe having friction when they work together. There's just so many different things that when you find that your business is in a state of flow, it generally means that things are going really well. It's not a slugfest every single day. And when you encounter those periods, and typically they're a season, typically it's a period of time. It's not just like one random day. It's you're stringing together multiple days, months, weeks of work that feels like it's getting the highest ROI possible and it's congruent with your team's efforts. Everybody's generally pretty happy, right? I would consider that to be organizational flow. And if you find yourself in a state or a season of organizational flow, embrace the heck out of it, because the one thing that we know is that if you're growing and even if you're not growing, the market's changing. So even if you're static in terms of, hey, you've got X amount of locations, there's not a lot of growth, not a lot of loss, the market's still going to change. And so the dynamics impacting your business are still going to change. And what I like to say is when you find that flow state within your organization, embrace it, because it will change. There will be a period where it will get tested and you'll fall out of this flow state. And then my hope for you and your team is that you're able to find it again. And I think that when you do, it's worthwhile to appreciate where you are, take stock of it, take inventory and be like, hey, this is cool. Things are working really right now. We should enjoy this season because we know that the one thing that is true in business is that it's always going to change. Until next time, I'm your host, Kevin Oldham, and I just have two asks. Number one, I'd love it if this episode resonated with you, if you wanted to share it with a friend. And number two, I'd love it if you subscribe to our show. Until next time, I hope that you have a phenomenal week and be well.